The Mac guys, after a Birds loss, we haven't done this in 10 months, so pardon us if we're out of practice talking about the Eagles after a loss. Been a long time, but they came up small against the Washington Commanders last night at the link and take their first loss of the regular season. And yeah, sorry, Bird fans, we feel the need to do this, point out where the Eagles came up short last night since they did just that and got beat by Washington. John, you talked about in the inability to stop the run, maybe they need to do some lineup switching. And you know how big a Nakobe Dean fan I am. I'm not quite sure why they've got him as much in mothballs as they do, but trying to get him out there in a three linebacker look and taking an extra DB off the field. Here's where I go with you. And Gannon's defense is what it is. You like it, you don't like it. He's not going to change. He's kind of stubborn that way. I think we're kind of whistling in the wind to think that they're going to employ something that you talk about. But here's where you can legitimately look for it and ask for it. Redskins went with a bunch of 12 lineups last night, 2 tight ends. And are you saying that you don't think Nakobe Dean can cover a tight end? That's what it comes down to. If the other team's got 5 offensive linemen and 2 tight ends there, they don't have that many receivers. You really need another cover corner out there instead of a linebacker who might be better tackling. You got to be able to situationally substitute, get guys in and out of the lineup, on and off the field. If Washington can get a second tight end out there, guess what? You can get an extra linebacker out there instead of an extra DB.
Yeah, you can. You can do more matching, more matchups, as you mentioned, when they are in 12 personnel, when there are in bigger lineups, and and it's not just about tackling; it's about run bits. Look, the best a slot cornerback in the world isn't going to be as good as run bits as the worst linebacker. I mean, that's just the way it is. Um, you know, those guys are not equipped for it. And again, it goes back. I talk about it all the time. And the Eagles aren't alone here. The Eagles are part of the crowd, as they usually are. Um, and again, I go back to the offseason when we talked about this. Nobody cares about the run until they have to care about the run, until they have to stop it. And then they go, oh, crap. Um, and, look, if Jordan Davis didn't get hurt, it probably still wouldn't be an issue. Nobody would be talking about it, but he did. And all of a sudden, you got to rely on Marlon Tuipulotu and Javon Hargrave playing where he's not comfortable. Fletcher Cox, who, as Les pointed out, is not playing well over the past few weeks. Yeah, I mean, you gotta change it up at least until Jordan comes back, and maybe then you can go back to what you want to do. But until then, and the part that makes it even worse is what I mentioned before. Avonte Maddox is not out. Look, if Avonte's out there, all right, I get it. That's a really good player. You don't want to you want to keep your best players on the field. How many times you hear coaches say that? Yeah, I want my best 11 on the field. And Avonte Maddox would certainly be in that category, Jody. But are you going to tell me Nakobe Dean's not better than Josiah Scott? Even if you boil it down to that simple notion, you're going to tell me Nakobe Dean can't help you win more than Josiah Scott? I don't believe you. Right. I don't believe you.
And I'll go even further and break it down to, well, what would be the responsibilities on that play if you're worried about covering? So here's what it came down to for me last night. And I didn't even realize this till just now when I looked at the numbers. Are you telling me you're in fear of the Redskins' 2 backup tight ends? Because John Bates, do you know who John Bates is?
Yeah, I do. But yeah.
Where'd he go to college?
Scary. That I don't know.
Okay, so you partially know John Bates. You know him better than I do, but you don't know John Bates either. He played last night 49% of the snaps. Okay, you say he was in instead of Logan Thomas. Well, Thomas played 73% of the snaps, so he didn't come off the field all that often. And do you know Amani Rogers?
That I don't know Amani Roger, but by the way, John Bates went to Boise State, fourth round
What'd you
pick.
say? Good for John Bates.
He plays quite a bit. But yeah, he's not explosive by any stretch of the
How
imagination.
many times was he targeted last night in the passing game?
No, he's not. Well, they didn't target anybody basically except Terry McLaurin. I mean, let's be honest. They didn't do anything in the passing game that didn't involve Terry McLaurin. Yeah,
Amani Rodgers from where? I don't
Oh.
know. Do you?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He played. Their third string tight end played 25% of the plays. He's out there for 25%. You know what that tells me? A whole lot of 12 personnel. And that tells me, yeah, you can get an extra linebacker onto the field rather than having an extra D back. You got to have Josiah Scott on there because he's got to cover Bates or Rodgers. That sounds like a motel you want to stay out of, not a guy you're afraid of they're going to throw the football to. I think that the point you make
Amani
is dead on about Gannon.
Amani Rodgers went to UNLV and then finished up at Ohio. So he's one of those dual guys.
Powerhouses. Yeah. How did I not know about Amani Rodgers?
Yeah, I mean, Bates played a lot because, Logan Thomas has, been so injured over the past couple of years, but he's not explosive. He's not that type of tight. He's a bigger guy. He's more of an old school Y back tight end, which again points out to, hey, we're going to run the football. Hey, it's not that big of a concern. Kaiser White can cover him. Nakobe Dean can cover him. TJ Edwards can probably cover him. They're very, and people say I defend Jonathan Gannon too much. Well, listen to this. He's very structured and he doesn't change a lot. And that's not a defense. That's a criticism.
Yep.
Sometimes you have to do some different things. That's what Jim Schwartz was really good at. I go back to Avonte Maddox's rookie year, and the Eagles were having so many issues at cornerback, so many injuries, safety. I'm sorry, so many injuries at safety, and we're all contemplating, what are they going to do? And it didn't even cross my mind that Avonte Maddox would play safety, and he put Avonte Maddox at safety, and he had the confidence to do some out of the box things. I don't see that from Jonathan Gannon, and I'd like to see it. And by the way, this is not out of the box. You're struggling to defend the run. Put a damn extra linebacker on the field. It's not an indictable defense to not be in nickel every single freaking play.
Absolutely. That's their defense. Their base defense is the nickel with three corners on the field at all times. And I get it that's the way the National Football League is trending, and that's the defense. If you're getting your reps in and your practice in, you want to take more reps and practice with that. But then you have actual in-game adjustments that you have to acknowledge the other team is doing something. Last night, that would be the Redskins converting on third down and converting on third down and converting on third down and converting on third down. And you have to be willing to make a roster adjustment, substitute guys in and out. And Jonathan Gannon is, I'll use the word stubborn. He believes his system is going to work. And over time, we're going to be better positioned, except until it doesn't. And last night it didn't. So sorry, Jonathan, we get to question you today because you didn't do any in-game adjusting. The Skins were throwing 2 and 3 tight end guys out there, and you're expecting Josiah Scott to shed a blocker and make a tackle for a loss rather than somebody like a Nakobe Dean to come off your bench. That's on the defense coordinator, McMahon.
Yeah, I mean, and again, maybe it would be different if Avonte Maddox was out there. I wouldn't be complaining. But when it is Josiah Scott, all of a sudden, come on. It's not, I get next man up, and coaches say that ad nauseum, and it annoys me. We give them the same responsibilities. Well, guess what? if you lose good players, the player coming in, we see it with Jordan Davis versus Marlon Tuipulotu. Guess what? Marlon's not Jordan Davis. Guess what? Josiah Scott's not Avonte Maddox. So it's okay to do something different to make up for the downgrade in that. That's my issue. That's my biggest issue. Sometimes when you lose players that are effective, it takes more than one to replace them. You might have to do some different things. You might have to go about things a different way. And maybe we need to see that. And maybe they, but I guarantee we're not going to see it. We're going to see Josiah Scott next week playing the nickel, and that's going to be that.
And you mentioned Marlon and Milton Williams. Milton made a big play last night. I know Marlon fell in the football, but that was just right guy, right spot, right time. Fletcher Cox struggled last night. Fletcher Cox was pushed around and out of position a couple of times and just lost one-on-one battles in the middle of the line. You're hoping, cross your fingers, that Jordan Davis will be back in time for the Tennessee game. But as you correctly point out, nobody knows for sure. The Eagles are going to keep that piece of information well under wraps, and we can all rapidly speculate, but that's all it is speculation. Should Fletcher Cox just get his number of reps week in and week out because he's Fletcher Cox?
No. But right now, I mean, who else are you going to play? I mean, again, I mean, who are you going to play? Marvin Wilson over Fletcher Cox? You're going to play more Marlon? You're going to play more Milton than Fletcher Cox?
Ding, ding, ding. That's exactly my answer.
I'm going to play more Milton. That ain't going to work out well. You got to rely on Javon. One of the things, look, it's easy to blame coaches. Now I'm going to do my 180. It's easy to blame coaches, but bottom line is the players got to perform. And I talked about that secondary. Look, they've been performing in this coverage scheme for pretty much the entire season. Yesterday, they played the same thing they always play, and that secondary crapped the bed. Now, at some point, you got to look at the players. You brought up Darius. It wasn't just Darius, but that was the worst game. That was the worst game he's played all year. At some point, the players have to perform, and they didn't.
Here's why I look at the comp of Darius Slay to Fletcher Cox, who were the two guys who I thought had the toughest time on defense all last night. Two Pro Bowl level players, two highly paid players, two veteran players. Darius Slay, up until last night, had been having a phenomenal year. An arguable Pro Bowl type year. Anybody making the argument for Fletcher Cox, a Pro Bowler, before last night? I don't think so.
No.
So that's why I'm suggesting maybe a few less reps for Fletcher Cox is not an outrageous thing to ask for. I'm not going to do the same thing with Darius Slay. Slay threw in a clunker. He got beat. He had a bad game. But he is of that level, and you're just going to have to shrug your shoulders and go, whoops, big play Slay was not big play Slay last night. Fletcher, I think it's a legitimate question to say, yeah, have we seen the decline to the point where we can't just plug him in for the same number of plays every week because he's Fletcher Cox?
If they had, a better option, maybe I would entertain that, but I don't think they have a better option. So that's part of it. But I agree, they're not the same level of player. I mean, Darius had a bad game, and Les, I said it great. I don't worry about Darius Slay. He's going to bounce back. He's going to play at a very high level. Fletcher Cox, you got to start wondering if, this is it for him. He's certainly not the player he once was. There's no question about that. He used to be a Darius Slay level player.
Yep.
He's not any longer. But I don't see a replacement. I'm not as high on Milton Williams as some other people. I don't see where this, default to Milton, and he played pretty well, I would say, yesterday. That was one of his better games.
Yeah.
But I think overall, He hasn't had a great season. Now, part of that, and I mentioned he was dealing with a knee injury, and maybe that was it. But he had not been. I would think the two young players that did, and Kenny Gainwell was awful again yesterday. Those are the two young players that you were hoping would take a big step forward. I don't think either of them have. Now, I don't think Milton's been as bad as Kenny, but I can't feel comfortable about Milton Williams over Fletcher Cox right now. I just can't.
I didn't say I felt comfortable, but I didn't feel comfortable watching Fletcher Cox play. So it's levels of uncomfortability. I could have used a couple more Milton Williams snaps. And if you want to talk about comparing to Slay, the drop off from Slay to Josh Jobe, oh, you're really just rolling the dice. Or Zach McPherson, you're really just rolling the dice. The drop off from Fletcher to Milton Williams isn't near as severe. That's why I would at least consider maybe reevaluating the number of snaps in the middle of the defensive line. A cornerback, you just got to go, all right, Slay had a bad game. Plain and simple. There's no move there after to address that. The address is, come on, Slay, make some big plays next week. All right, Jody McDonald, then John McMullen, your Mac and Mac Birds 365 guys. Coming back next, we will be joined Mr. NJ.com jumping aboard. Will he be indoors? Will he be outdoors? We will not know. You will not know until we come back here on Birds 365 with Chris Franklin.
Don't wait until after Thanksgiving